Book 5, Part 1 of the Aeneid. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro, translated by John Dryden. Book 5, Games and a Conflagration, Part 1. Meantime the Trojan cuts his watery way, fix'd on his voyage through the curling sea. Then, casting back his eyes with dire amaze, sees on the Punic shore the mounting blaze. The cause unknown, yet his presaging mind the fate of Dido from the fire divined. He knew the stormy souls of womankind, what secret springs their eager passions move, how capable of death for injur'd love. Dire auguries from thence the Trojans draw, till neither fires nor shining shores they saw. Now seas and skies their prospect only bound, an empty space above, a floating field around. But soon the heavens with shadows were o'erspread, a swelling cloud hung hov'ring o'er their head. Livid it look'd, the threat'ning of a storm, then night and horror, ocean's face deform. The pilot, Palinurus, cried aloud, "What gusts of weather from that gath'ring cloud my thoughts presage! Ere yet the tempest roars, stand to your tackle, mates, and stretch your oars. Contract your swelling sails, and luff to wind." The frighted crew perform'd the task assign'd. Then to his fearless chief, "Not heav'n," said he, "though Jove himself should promise Italy, can stem the torrent of this raging sea. Mark how the shifting winds from west arise, and what collected night involves the skies. Nor can our shaken vessels live at sea, much less against the tempest force their way. 'Tis fate diverts our course, and fate we must obey. Not far from hence, if I observ'd aright the southing of the stars and polar light, Sicilia lies, whose hospitable shores in safety we may reach with struggling oars." Aeneas then replied, "Too sure I find we strive in vain against the seas and wind. Now shift your sails. What place can please me more than what you promise, the Sicilian shore, whose hallow'd earth Anchises' bone contains, and where a prince of Trojan lineage reigns?" The course resolv'd, before the western wind they scud amain, and make the port a sign. Meanwhile Acestes from a lofty stand beheld the fleet descending on the land, and, not unmindful of his ancient race, down from the cliff he ran with eager pace, and held the hero in a strict embrace. Of a rough Libyan bear the spoils he wore, and either hand a pointed jav'lin bore. His mother was a dame of Dardan blood, his sire Crinisus, a Sicilian flood. He welcomes his returning friends ashore, with plenteous country cates and homely store. Now, when the following morn had chas'd away the flying stars, and light restor'd the day, Aeneas call'd the Trojan troops around, and thus bespoke them from a rising ground: "Offspring of heav'n, divine Dardanian race, the sun revolving thro' th' ethereal space, the shining circle of the year has fill'd, since first this isle my father's ashes held. And now the rising day renews the year, a day for ever sad, for ever dear. This would I celebrate with annual games, with gifts on altars piled, and holy flames. though banish'd to Gaetulia's barren sands, caught on the Grecian seas, or hostile lands. But since this happy storm our fleet has driven, not, as I deem, without the will of heaven, upon these friendly shores and flowery plains, which hide Anchises and his blest remains, let us with joy perform his honours due, and pray for prosperous winds our voyage to renew. Pray that in towns and temples of our own the name of great Anchises may be known, and yearly games may spread the gods' renown. Our sports, Acestes of the Trojan race, with royal gifts ordain'd is pleas'd to grace. 2 steers on every ship the king bestows, his gods and ours shall share your equal vows. Besides, if, 9 days hence, the rosy morn shall with unclouded light the skies adorn, that day with solemn sports I mean to grace. Light galleys on the seas shall run a wat'ry race. Some shall in swiftness for the gold contend, and others try the twanging bow to bend. The strong with iron gauntlets arm'd shall stand, opposed in combat on the yellow sand. Let all be present at the games prepar'd, and joyful victors wait the just reward. But now assist the rites with garlands crown'd. He said, and first his brows with myrtle bound, then Helymus by his example led, and old Acestes each adorn'd his head. Thus young Ascanius with a sprightly grace his temples tied, and all the Trojan race. Aeneas then advanced amidst the train, by thousands follow'd through the fruitful plain, to great Anchises' tomb, which when he found, he pour'd to Bacchus on the hallow'd ground 2 bowls of sparkling wine, of milk 2 more, and 2 from offer'd bulls of purple gore. With roses then the sepulchre he strow'd, and thus his father's ghost he spoke aloud. Hail, O ye holy mourners, hail again! Paternal ashes, now review'd in vain. The gods permitted not that you with me should reach the promis'd shores of Italy, or Tiber's flood, what flood soe'er it be. Scarce had he finish'd, when, with speckled pride, a serpent from the tomb began to glide. His hugy bulk on 7 high volumes roll'd, blue was his breadth of back, but streak'd with gold. Thus, riding on his curls, he seem'd to pass a rolling fire along, and singe the grass. More various colours through his body run, than Iris with her bow imbibes the sun. Betwixt the rising altars and around, the sacred monster shot along the ground. With harmless play amidst the bowls he pass'd, and with his lolling tongue essay'd the taste. Thus, fed with holy food, the wondrous guest within the hollow tomb retir'd to rest. The pious prince, surprised at what he view'd, the funeral honours with more zeal renew'd. Doubtful if this the place's genius were, or guardian of his father's sepulchre. 2 sheep, according to the rites he slew, as many swine and steers of sable hue. New generous wine he from the goblets pour'd, and call'd his father's ghost from hell restored. The glad attendants in long order come, off'ring their gifts at great Anchises' tomb. Some add more oxen, some divide the spoil, some place the chargers on the grassy soil, some blow the fire, and offer'd entrails broil. Now came the day desir'd. The skies were bright with rosy lustre of the rising light. The bord'ring people, roused by sounding fame of Trojan feasts and great Acestes' name, the crowded shore with acclamations fill, part to behold, and part to prove their skill. And first the gifts in public view they place, green laurel wreaths and palm, the victor's grace. Within the circle arms and tripods lie, ingots of gold and silver heap'd on high, and vests embroider'd of the Tyrian dye. The trumpet's clangor then the feast proclaims, and all prepare for their appointed games. 4 galleys first with equal rowers bear, advancing in the watery lists appear. The speedy dolphin that outstrips the wind bore Menestheus, author of the Mamaean kind. Gyas the vast Chimera's bulk commands, which rising like a tow'ring city stands. 3 Trojans tug at every labouring oar, 3 banks in 3 degrees the sailors bore. Beneath their sturdy strokes the billows roar. Sergestus, who began the Sergian race, in the great Centaur took the leading place. Cloanthus on the sea-green Scylla stood, from whom Cluentius draws his Trojan blood. Far in the sea, against the foaming shore, there stands a rock. The raging billows roar above his head in storms. But when 'tis clear, uncurl their ridgy backs, and at his foot appear. In peace below the gentle waters run, the cormorants above lie basking in the sun. On this the hero fix'd an oak in sight, the mark to guide the mariners aright. To bear with this, the seamen stretch their oars, then round the rock they steer, and seek the former shores. The lots decide their place. Above the rest, each leader shining in his Tyrian vest, the common crew, with wreaths of poplar boughs, their temples crown and shade their sweaty brows. Besmear'd with oil their naked shoulders shine, all take their seats and wait the sounding sign. They grip their oars, and every panting breast is raised by turns by hope, by turns with fear depress'd. The clangor of the trumpet gives the sign. At once they start, advancing in a line. With shouts the sailors rend the starry skies, lash'd with their oars the smoky billows rise. Sparkles the briny main, and the vexed ocean fries. Exact in time, with equal strokes they row. At once the brushing oars and brazen prow dash up the sandy waves, and ope the depths below. Not fiery coursers in a chariot race invade the field with half so swift a pace, nor the fierce driver with more fury lends the sounding lash, and ere the stroke descends, low to the wheels his pliant body bends. The partial crowd their hopes and fears divide, and aid with eager shouts the favour'd side. Cries, murmurs, clamours, with a mixing sound, from woods to woods, from hills to hills rebound. Amidst the loud applauses of the shore, Gyas outstripp'd the rest, and sprung before. Cloanthus, better mann'd, pursued him fast, but his o'er-masted galley check'd his haste. The Centaur and the Dolphin brush'd the brine with equal oars, advancing in a line. And now the mighty Centaur seems to lead, and now the speedy Dolphin gets ahead. Now board to board the rival vessels row, the billows lave the skies, and ocean groans below. They reach the mark. Proud Gyas and his train in triumph rode, the victors of the main. But, steering round, he charg'd his pilot stand more close to shore, and skim along the sand. Let others bear to sea. Menoetes heard, but secret shelves too cautiously he fear'd, and fearing sought the deep, and still aloof he steer'd. With louder cries the captain call'd again, "Bear to the rocky shore, and shun the main." He spoke, and speaking, at his stern he saw the bold Cloanthus near the shelvings draw. Betwixt the mark and him the Scylla stood, and in a closer compass plow'd the flood. He pass'd the mark, and wheeling got before. Gyas blasphem'd the gods, devotedly swore, cried out for anger, and his hair he tore. Mindless of others' lives, so high was grown his rising rage, and careless of his own, the trembling dotard to the deck he drew, then hoisted up, and overboard he threw. This done, he seiz'd the helm, his fellows cheer'd, turn'd short upon the shelves, and madly steer'd. Hardly his head the plunging pilot rears, clogg'd with his clothes, and cumber'd with his years. Now, dripping wet, he climbs the cliff with pain. The crowd, that saw him fall and float again, shout from the distant shore, and loudly laugh to see his heaving breast disgorge the briny draught. The following Centaur and the Dolphin's crew their vanish'd hopes of victory renew. While Gyas lags, they kindle in the race. To reach the mark, Sergestus takes the place. Mnestheus pursues, and while around they wind, comes up, not half his galley's length behind. Then on the deck amidst his mates appear'd, and thus their drooping courage he cheer'd. My friends, and Hector's followers heretofore, exert your vigour, tug the labouring oar. Stretch to your strokes, my still unconquer'd crew, whom from the flaming walls of Troy I drew. In this our common interest let me find that strength of hand, that courage of the mind, as when you stem'd the strong Malaean flood, and o'er the Syrtes' broken billows row'd. I seek not now the foremost palm to gain, though yet, but that haughty wish is vain. Let those enjoy it whom the gods ordain. But, to be last, the lags of all the race, redeem yourselves and me from that disgrace. Now, one and all, they lug amain, they row at the full stretch, and shake the brazen prow. The sea beneath them sinks, their lab'ring sides are swell'd, and sweat runs guttering down in tides. Chance aids their daring with unhoped success. Sergestus, eager with his beak to press betwixt the rival galley and the rock, shuts up the unwieldy Centaur in the lock. The vessel struck, and with the dreadful shock her oars she shiver'd, and her head she broke. The trembling rowers from their banks arise, and anxious for themselves renounce the prize. With iron poles they heave her off the shores, and gather from the sea their floating oars. The crew of Mnestheus with elated minds urge their success, and call the willing winds. Then ply their oars, and cut their liquid way in larger compass on the roomy sea. As, when the dove her rocky hole forsakes, rous'd in a fright, her sounding rings she shakes. The cavern rings with clattering, out she flies, and leaves her callow care, and cleaves the skies. At first she flutters, but at length she springs to smoother flight, and shoots upon her wings. So Mnestheus in the Dolphin cuts the sea, and flying with a force, that force assists his way. Sergestus in the Centaur soon he pass'd, wedged in the rocky shoals, and sticking fast. In vain the victor he with cries implores, and practices to row with shatter'd oars. Then Mnestheus bears with Gyas, and outflies. The ship, without a pilot, yields the prize. Unvanquish'd Scylla now alone remains. Her he pursues, and all his vigour strains. Shouts from the fav'ring multitude arise. Applauding echo to the shouts replies. Shouts, wishes, and applause run rattling through the skies. These clamours with disdain the Scylla heard, much grudg'd the praise, but more the robb'd reward. Resolv'd to hold their own, they mend their pace, all obstinate to die or gain the race. Rais'd with success, the dolphins swiftly ran, for they can conquer who believe they can. Both urge their oars, and fortune both supplies, and both perhaps had shar'd an equal prize, when to the seas Cloanthus holds his hands, and succour from the wat'ry powers demand. Gods of the liquid realms on which I row, if, given by you, the laurel bind my brow, assist to make me guilty of my vow. A snow-white bull shall on your shore be slain, his offer'd entrails cast into the main, and ruddy wine from golden goblets thrown your grateful gift and my return shall own. The choir of nymphs and Phorcus from below, with virgin Panopia heard this vow, and old Portunus with his breadth of hand push'd on, and sped the galley to the land. Swift as a shaft, or winged wing she flies, and darting to the port, obtains the prize. The herald summons all, and then proclaims Cloanthus conqueror of the naval games. The prince with laurel crowns the victor's head, and 3 fat steers are to his vessel led, the ship's reward, with generous wine beside, and sums of silver which the crew divide. The leaders are distinguish'd from the rest, the victor honour'd with a nobler vest, where gold and purple strive in equal rows, and needlework its happy cost bestows. There Ganymede is wrought with living art, chasing through Ida's groves the trembling hart. Breathless he seems, yet eager to pursue, when from aloft descends in open view the bird of Jove, and, sousing on his prey, with crooked talons bears the boy away. In vain, with lifted hands and gazing eyes, his gods behold him soaring through the skies, and dogs pursue his flight with imitated cry. Mnestheus the second victor was declar'd, and summon'd there the second prize he shared. A coat of mail which brave Demoleus bore, more brave Aeneas from his shoulders tore, in single combat on the Trojan shore. This was ordained for Mnestheus to possess, in war for his defence, for ornament in peace. Rich was the gift, and glorious to behold, but yet so ponderous with its plates of gold, that scarce 2 servants could the weight sustain. Yet, loaded thus, Demoleus o'er the plain pursued, and lightly seized the Trojan train. The third, succeeding to the last reward, 2 goodly bowls of massy silver shared, with figures prominent and richly wrought, and 2 brass cauldrons from Dodona brought. Thus all, rewarded by the hero's hands, their conquering temples bound with purple bands. And now Sergestus, clearing from the rock, brought back his galley shatter'd with the shock. Forlorn she look'd without an aiding oar, and hooted by the vulgar made to shore. As when a snake, surpris'd upon the road, is crush'd athwart her body by the load of heavy wheels, or with a mortal wound her belly bruised and trodden to the ground. In vain with loosen'd curls she crawls along, yet fierce above she brandishes her tongue, glares with her eyes, and bristles with her scales. But, grovelling in the dust, her parts unsound she trails. So, slowly to the port the Centaur tends, but what she wants in oars with sails amends. Yet, for his galley sav'd, the grateful prince is pleas'd the unhappy chief to recompense. Pholoe, the Cretan slave, rewards his care, beauteous herself, with lovely twins as fair. From thence his way the Trojan hero bent into the neighb'ring plain with mountains pent, whose sides were shaded with surrounding wood.
Full in the midst of this fair valley stood a native theatre,
which rising slow by just degrees, o'erlook'd the ground below. High on a sylvan throne the leader sate, a numerous train attend in solemn state. Here those that in the rapid course delight, desire of honour, and the prize invite. The rival runners without order stand, the Trojans mix'd with the Sicilian band. First Nisus with Euryalus appears, Euryalus a boy of blooming years. With sprightly grace and equal beauty crown'd,
Nisus for friendship to the youth renown'd.
Diores next, of Priam's royal race, then Salius join'd with Patron took their place. But Patron in Arcadia had his birth, and Salius his from Acarnanian earth. When two Sicilian youths, the names of those swift Helymus and lovely Panopes, both jolly huntsmen, both in forest bred, and owning all Acestes for the head, and several others of ignobler name, whom time has not deliver'd o'er to fame. To these the hero thus his thoughts explain'd, in words which general approbation gain'd. One common largess is for all design'd, the vanquish'd and the victor shall be join'd. 2 darts of polish'd steel and Gnosian wood, a silver-studded axe alike bestow'd. The foremost 3 have olive wreaths decreed. The first of these obtains a stately steed, adorned with trappings, and the next in fame the quiver of an Amazonian dame, with feather'd Thracian arrows well supplied. A golden belt shall gird his manly side, which with a sparkling diamond shall be tied. The third this Grecian helmet shall content, he said. To their appointed base they went, with beating hearts the expected sign receiv'd, and starting all at once the barrier leave. Spread out as on the winged winds they flew, and seiz'd the distant goal with greedy view.
Shot from the crowd, swift Nisus all o'erpass'd, nor storms nor thunder equal half his haste. The next, but though the next yet far disjoin'd, came Salius and Euryalus behind.
Then Helymus, who young Diores plied, step after step, and almost side by side,
his shoulders pressing, and in longer space had won, or left at least a dubious race.
Now spent, the goal they almost reach at last, when eager Nisus, hapless in his haste, slipped first, and slipping fell upon the plain, soaked with the blood of oxen newly slain. The careless victor had not marked his way, but treading where the treacherous puddle lay, his heels flew up, and on the grassy floor he fell, besmear'd with filth and holy gore. Not mindless then, Euryalus, of thee, nor of the sacred bonds of amity, he strove the immediate rival's hope to cross, and caught the foot of Salius as he rose. So Salius lay extended on the plain.
Euryalus springs out the prize to gain, and leaves the crowd. Applauding peals attend the victor to his goal, who vanquish'd by his friend. Next Helymus, then Diores came, by 2 misfortunes made the third in fame.
But Salius enters, and exclaiming loud for justice, deafens and disturbs the crowd, urges his cause may in the court be heard, and pleads the prize is wrongfully conferred. But favour for Euryalus appears, his blooming beauty with his tender years had bribed the judges for the promised prize. Besides, Diores fills the court with cries, who vainly reaches at the last reward, if the first palm on Salius be conferred. Then thus the prince: let no disputes arise, where fortune placed it, I award the prize. But fortune's errors
give me leave to mend, at least to pity my deserving friend," he said. And from among the spoils he draws, ponderous with shaggy mane and golden paws, a lion's hide. To Salius this he gives. Nisus with envy sees the gift and grieves. "If such rewards to vanquish'd men are due," he said, "and falling is to rise by you, what prize may Nisus from your bounty claim, who merited first rewards and fame? In falling both an equal fortune tried, would fortune for my fall so well provide." With this he pointed to his face, and show'd his hand, and all his habit smear'd with blood. The indulgent father of the people smil'd, and caus'd to be produc'd an ample shield of wondrous art. By Didymaon wrought, long since from Neptune's bars in triumph brought. This, given to Nisus, he divides the rest, and equal justice in his gifts express'd. The race thus ended, and rewards bestow'd, once more the prince bespeaks th' attentive crowd. "If there be here whose dauntless courage dare in gauntlet fight with limbs and body bare, his opposite sustain in open view, stand forth the champion, and the games renew. 2 prizes I propose, and thus divide: a bull with gilded horns and fillets tied shall be the portion of the conquering chief. A sword and helm shall cheer the loser's grief." Then haughty Dares in the lists appears. Stalking he strides, his head erected bears. His nervous arms the weighty gauntlet wield, and loud applauses echo thro' the field. Dares alone in combat us'd to stand, the match of mighty Paris, hand to hand. The same at Hector's funerals undertook gigantic Butes of th' Amycian stock, and by the stroke of his resistless hand stretch'd the vast bulk upon the yellow sand. Such Dares was, and such he strode along, and drew the wonder of the gazing throng. His brawny back and ample breast he shows, his lifted arms around his head he throws, and deals in whistling air his empty blows. His match is sought, but thro' the trembling band not one dares answer to the proud demand. Presuming of his force with sparkling eyes, already he devours the promis'd prize. He claims the bull with awless insolence, and having seiz'd his horns, accosts the prince. "If none my matchless valour dares oppose, how long shall Dares wait his dastard foes? Permit me, chief, permit without delay, to lead this uncontested gift away." The crowd assents, and with redoubled cries, for the proud challenger demands the prize. End of Book 5, Part 1. Book 5, Part 2 of the Aeneid. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro. Translated by John Dryden. Book 5, Games and a Conflagration. Part 2. Acestes, fired with just disdain, to see the palm usurped without a victory, reproach'd Entellus thus, who sate beside, and heard and saw unmov'd the Trojans' pride. Once, but in vain, a champion of renown, so tamely can you bear the ravish'd crown. A prize in triumph borne before your sight, and shun for fear the danger of the fight? Where is our Eryx now, the boasted name, the god who taught your thundering arm the game? Where now your baffled honour? Where the spoil that fill'd your house, and fame that fill'd our isle? Entellus thus: "My soul is still the same, unmov'd with fear, and mov'd with martial fame.
but my chill blood is curdled in my veins, and scarce the shadow of a man remains. Oh, could I turn to that fair prime again, that prime of which this boaster is so vain! The brave, who this decrepit age defies, should feel my force without the promis'd prize." He said, and rising at the word, he threw 2 ponderous gauntlets down in open view; gauntlets which Erks wont in fight to wield, and sheath'd his hand with in the listed field. With fear and wonder seiz'd the crowd beholds the gloves of death, with 7 distinguish'd folds of tough bull hides. The space within is spread with iron, or with loads of heavy lead. Dares himself was daunted at the sight, renounced his challenge, and refused to fight. Astonish'd at their weight, the hero stands, and poised the pond'rous engines in his hands. "What had your wonder," said Entellus, "been, had you the gauntlets of Alcides seen, or view'd the stern debate on this unhappy green? These which I bear your brother Eryx bore, still mark'd with batter'd brains and mingled gore. With these he long sustain'd the Herculean arm, and these I wielded while my blood was warm. This languag'd frame, while better spirits fed, ere age unstrung my nerves, or time o'ersnow'd my head. But if the challenger these arms refuse, and cannot wield their weight, or dare not use, if great Aeneas and Acestes join in his request, these gauntlets I resign. Let us with equal arms perform the fight, and let him leave to fare, since I resign my right." This said, Entellus for the strife prepares. Stripp'd of his quilted coat, his body bears. Composed of mighty bones and brawn he stands, a goodly tow'ring object on the sands. Then just Aeneas equal arms supplied, which round their shoulders to their wrists they tied. Both on the tiptoe stand at full extent, their arms aloft, their bodies inly bent. Their heads from aiming blows they bear afar, with clashing gauntlets then provoke the war. One on his youth and pliant limbs relies, one on his sinews and his giant size. The last is still with age, his motion slow. He heaves for breath, he staggers to and fro, and clouds of issuing smoke his nostrils loudly blow. Yet, equal in success, they ward, they strike. Their ways are different, but their art alike. Before, behind, the blows are dealt. Around their hollow sides the rattling thumps resound. A storm of strokes, well meant, with fury flies, and errs about their temples, ears, and eyes. Nor always errs, for oft the gauntlet draws a sweeping stroke along the crackling jaws, heavy with age. Entellus stands his ground, but with his warping body wards the wound. His hand and watchful eye keep even pace, while Dares traverses and shifts his place. And, like a captain who beleaguers round some strong-built castle on a rising ground, views all th' approaches with observing eyes, this and that other part in vain he tries, and more on industry than force relies. With hands on high, Entellus threats the foe, but Dares watch'd the motion from below, and slipp'd aside, and shunn'd the long descending blow. Entellus wastes his forces on the wind, and thus deluded of the stroke design'd, headlong and heavy fell, his ample breast and weighty limbs his ancient mother press'd. So falls a hollow pine that long had stood on Ida's height, or erymanthus wood, torn from the roots. The diff'ring nations rise, and shouts and mingled murmurs rend the skies. Acestus runs with eager haste to raise the fallen companion of his youthful days. Dauntless he rose, and to the fight return'd. With shame his glowing cheeks, his eyes with fury burn'd. Disdain and conscious virtue fir'd his breast, and with redoubled force his foe he press'd. He lays on load with either hand amain, and headlong drives the Trojan o'er the plain. Nor stops, nor stays, nor rest, nor breath allows, but storm of stroke descend about his brows. A rattling tempest and a hail of blows. But now the prince, who saw the wild increase of wounds, commands the combatants to cease, and bounds Entellus' wrath, and bids the peace. First to the Trojans spent with toil he came, and sooth'd his sorrow for the suffer'd shame. "What fury seiz'd my friend?" "The gods," said he, "to him propitious, and averse to thee, have giv'n his arms superior force to thine. 'Tis madness to contend with strength divine." The gauntlet fight thus ended, from the shore his faithful friends unhappy Dares bore. His mouth and nostrils pour'd a purple flood, and pounded teeth came rushing with his blood. Faintly he stagger'd thro' the hissing throng, and hung his head, and trail'd his legs along. The sword and casque are carried by his train, but with his foe the palm and ox remain. The champion then before Aeneas came, proud of his prize, but prouder of his fame. "O goddess born, and you, Dardanian host, mark with attention, and forgive my boast. Learn what I was, by what remains, and know from what impending fate you sav'd my foe." Sternly he spoke, and then confronts the bull, and, on his ample forehead aiming full, the deadly stroke descending pierc'd the skull. Down drops the beast, nor needs a second wound, but sprawls in pangs of death, and spurns the ground. Then thus: "In Dares' stead I offer this: Eryx, accept a noble sacrifice. Take the last gift my weather'd arms can yield. Thy gauntlets I resign, and here renounce the field." This done, Aeneas orders, for the close, the strife of archers with contending bows. The mast Sergestus' shatter'd galley bore, with his own hands he raises on the shore. A fluttering dove upon the top they tie, the living mark at which their arrows fly. The rival archers in a line advance, their turn of shooting to receive from chance. A helmet holds their names, the lots are drawn. On the first scroll was read Hippocouon. The people shout. Upon the next was found young Mnestheus, late with naval honours crown'd. The third contain'd Eurytion's noble name, thy brother Pandarus, and next in fame, whom Pallas urg'd the treaty to confound, and send among the gifts a feather'd wound. Acestes in the bottom last remain'd, whom not his age from youthful sports restrain'd. Soon all with vigour bend their trusty bows, and from the quiver each his arrow chose. Hippocouon's was the first, with forceful sway it flew, and whizzing cut the liquid way. Fix'd in the mast, the feather'd weapon stands. The fearful pigeon flutters in her bands, and the tree trembled, and the shouting cries of the pleas'd people rend the vaulted skies. Then Mnestheus to the head his arrow drove, with lifted eyes, and took his aim above, but made a glancing shot, and miss'd the dove, yet miss'd so narrow that he cut the cord which fasten'd by the foot the flitting bird. The captive thus releas'd, away she flies, and beats with clapping wings the yielding skies. His bow already bent, Ereuthyon stood, and having first invok'd his brother god, his winged shaft with eager haste he sped. The fatal message reach'd her as she fled. She leaves her life aloft, she strikes the ground, and renders back the weapon in the wound. Acestes, grudging at his lot, remains without a prize to gratify his pains, yet shooting upward sends his shaft, to show an archer's art, and boast his twanging bow. The feather'd arrow gave a dire portent, and later augurs judge from this event. Chaf'd by the speed, it fir'd, and as it flew, a trail of following flames ascending drew. Kindling they mount, and mark the shiny way across the skies, as falling meteors play, and vanish into wind, or in a blaze decay. The Trojans and Sicilians wildly stare, and trembling turn their wonder into prayer. The Dardan prince put on a smiling face, and strain'd Acestes with a close embrace. Then, honoring him with gifts above the rest, turn'd the bad omen, nor his fears confess'd. "The gods," said he, "this miracle have wrought, and order'd you the prize without the lot. Accept this goblet, rough with figur'd gold, which Thracian Cisseus gave my sire of old. This pledge of ancient amity receive, which to my second sire I justly give." He said, and, with the trumpet's cheerful sound, proclaim'd him victor, and with laurel crown'd. Nor good Ereuthyon envied him the prize, though he transfix'd the pigeon in the sky. Who cut the line, with second gifts was grac'd; the third was his whose arrow pierc'd the mast. The chief, before the games were wholly done, call'd Periphantes tutor to his son, and whisper'd thus: "With speed Ascanius find, and if his childish troop be ready join'd, on horseback let him grace his grandsire's day, and lead his equals arm'd in just array." He said, and calling out, the cirque he clears. The crowd withdrawn, an open plain appears. And now the noble youths of form divine advance before their fathers in a line. The riders grace the steeds with glory shine. Thus, marching on in military pride, shouts of applause resound from side to side. Their casques adorn'd with laurel wreaths they wear, each brandishing aloft a cornel spear. Some at their backs their gilded quivers bore, their chains of burnish'd gold hung down before. 3 graceful troops they form'd upon the green, 3 graceful leaders at their head were seen. 12 follow'd every chief, and left a space between. The first young Priam led, a lovely boy, whose grandsire was the unhappy king of Troy. His race in after times was known to fame, new honours adding to the Latian name. And well the royal boy his Thracian steed became, white were the fetlocks of his feet before, and on his front a snowy star he bore. Then beauteous Attis, with Iulus bred, of equal age, the second squadron led. The last in order, but the first in place, first in the lovely features of his face, rode fair Ascanius on a fiery steed, Queen Dido's gift, and of the Tyrian breed. Sure coursers for the rest the king ordains, with golden bits adorn'd, and purple reins. The pleas'd spectators peals of shouts renew, and all the parents in the children view them, make their motions, and their sprightly grace. And hopes and fears alternate in their face. The unfledged commanders and their martial train first make the circuit of the sandy plain around their sires, and at the appointed sign, drawn up in beauteous order, form a line. The second signal sounds, the troop divides in 3 distinguish'd parts, with 3 distinguish'd guides. Again they close, and once again disjoin, in troop to troop opposed, and line to line. They meet, they wheel, they throw their darts afar, with harmless rage and well-dissembled war. Then in a round the mingled bodies run, flying they follow, and pursuing shun. Broken they break, and rallying they renew in other forms the military shew. At last in order undiscern'd they join, and march together in a friendly line. And, as the Cretan labyrinth of old, with wandering ways and many a winding fold, involv'd the weary feet without redress in a round error which denied recess. So fought the Trojan boys in warlike play, turn'd and return'd, and still a different way. Thus dolphins in the deep each other chase in circles, when they swim around the watery race. This game, these carousels, Ascanius taught, and building Alba to the Latins brought. Shew'd what he learn'd, the Latin sires impart to their succeeding sons the graceful art. From these imperial Rome receiv'd the game, which Troy, the youths, the Trojan troop, they name. Thus far the sacred sports they celebrate, but Fortune soon resum'd her ancient hate. For while they pay their dead his annual dues, those envied rites Saturnian Juno views, and sends the goddess of the various bow to try new methods of revenge below. Supplies the winds to wing her airy way, where in the port secure the navy lay. Swiftly fair Iris down her arch descends, and undiscern'd her fatal voyage ends. She saw the gathering crowd, and gliding thence the desert shore, and fleet without defence. The Trojan matrons on the sands alone, with sighs and tears Anchises' death bemoan. Then turning to the sea their weeping eyes, their pity to themselves renews their cries. "Alas," said one, "what oceans yet remain for us to sail, what labours to sustain!" All take the word, and, with a general groan, implore the gods for peace and places of their own. The goddess, great in mischief, views their pains, and in a woman's form her heav'nly limbs restrains. In face and shape old Beroe she becomes, Doricles' wife, a venerable dame, once bless'd with riches and a mother's name. Thus chang'd, amidst the crying crowd she ran, mix'd with the matrons, and these words began: "O wretched we, whom not the Grecian pow'r nor flames destroyed in Troy's unhappy hour! O wretched we, reserv'd by cruel fate beyond the ruins of the sinking state! Now 7 revolving years are wholly run since this improsperous voyage we begun; Since, toss'd from shores to shores, from lands to lands, Inhospitable rocks and barren sands, Wand'ring in exile thro' the stormy sea, We search in vain for flying Italy. Now, cast by fortune on this kindred land, What should our rest and rising walls withstand, Or hinder here to fix our banish'd band? O country lost, and gods redeem'd in vain, If still in endless exile we remain! Shall we no more the Trojan walls renew, Or streams of some dissembled Simois view? Haste, join with me, the unhappy fleet consume, Cassandra bids, and I declare her doom. In sleep I saw her, she supplied my hands. For this I more than dreamt, with flaming brands. With these, said she, these wandering ships destroy. These are your fatal seats, and this your Troy. Time calls you now, the precious hour employ. Slack not the good presage, while heav'n inspires our minds to dare, and gives the ready fires. See, Neptune's altars minister their brands. The god is pleased, the god supplies our hands. And from the pile a flaming fire she drew, and, toss'd in air, amidst the galleys threw. Wrapp'd in amaze, the matrons wildly stare. Then Pyrgo reverenced for her hoary hair, Pyrgo, the nurse of Priam's num'rous race. No Beroe this, though she belies her face. What terrors from her frowning front arise! Behold a goddess in her ardent eyes. What rays around her heav'nly face are seen! Mark her majestic voice, and more than mortal mien. Beroe but now I left, whom, pin'd with pain, her age and anguish from these rites detain. She said. The matrons, seiz'd with new amaze, roll their malignant eyes, and on the navy gaze. They fear and hope, and neither part obey. They hope the fated land, but fear the fatal way. The goddess, having done her task below, mounts up on equal wings, and bends the painted bow. Struck with the sight, and seiz'd with rage divine, the matrons prosecute their mad design. They shriek aloud, they snatch with impious hands the food of altars, fires, and flaming brands. Green boughs and saplings mingled in their haste, and smoking torches on the ships they cast. The flame, unstopp'd at first, more fury gains, and Vulcan rides at large with loosen'd reins. Triumphant to the painted sterns he soars, and seizes in this way the banks and crackling oars. Eumelus was the first the news to bear, while yet they crowd the rural theatre. Then what they hear is witness'd by their eyes. A storm of sparkles and of flames arise. Ascanius took the alarm, while yet he led his early warriors on his prancing steed, and, spurring on, his equal soon o'erpass'd. Nor could his frighted friends reclaim his haste. Soon as the royal youth appear'd in view, he sent his voice before him as he flew. What madness moves you, matrons, to destroy the last remainders of unhappy Troy? Not hostile fleets, but your own hopes you burn, and on your friends your fatal fury turn. Behold your own Ascanius. While he said, he drew his glittering helmet from his head, in which the youths to sportful arms he led. By this Aeneas and his train appear. And now the women, seiz'd with shame and fear, dispers'd, to woods and cavern take their flight. Abhor their actions, and avoid the light. Their friends acknowledge, and their error find, and shake the goddess from their alter'd mind. Not so the raging fires their fury cease, but, lurking in the seams, with seeming peace, work on their way amidst the smouldering tow, sure in destruction, but in motion slow. The silent plague thro' the green timber eats, and vomits out a tardy flame by fits. Down to the keels and upward to the sails the fire descends, or mounts, but still prevails. Nor buckets pour'd, nor strength of human hand, can the victorious element withstand. The pious hero rends his robe, and throws to heav'ns his hand, and with his friends his vows. "O Jove," he cried, "if prayers can yet have place, if thou abhorrest not all the Dardan race, if any spark of pity still remain, if gods are gods, and not invoked in vain, Yet spare the relics of the Trojan train, yet from the flames our burning vessels free, or let thy fury fall alone on me. At this devoted head thy thunder throw, and send the willing sacrifice below." Scarce had he said, when southern storms arise, From pole to pole the forky lightning flies. Loud rattling shakes the mountains and the plain, Heav'n bellies downward, and descends in rain. Whole sheets of water from the clouds are sent, Which, hissing thro' the planks, the flames prevent, And stop the fiery pest. 4 ships alone burnt to the waist, and for the fleet atone. But doubtful thoughts the hero's heart divide, If he should still in Sicily reside, Forgetful of his fates, or tempt the main, In hope the promis'd Italy to gain. Then Notes, old and wise, to whom alone The will of Heav'n by Pallas was foreshown, Vers'd in portents, experienced, and inspir'd To tell events, and what the fates requir'd. Thus, while he stood, to neither part inclin'd, With cheerful words reliev'd his lab'ring mind. "O goddess born, resign'd in every state, With patience bear, with prudence push your fate. By suffering well our fortune we subdue, Fly when she frowns, and when she calls, pursue. Your friend Acestes is of Trojan kind, To him disclose the secrets of your mind. Trust in his hands your old and useless train, Too numerous for the ships which yet remain. The feeble, old, indulgent of their ease, The dames who dread the dangers of the seas, With all the dastard crew who dare not stand The shock of battle with your foes by land. Here you may build a common town for all, And from Acestes' name Acesta call." The reasons, with his friend's experience join'd, Encourag'd much, but more disturb'd his mind. 'Twas dead of night, when to his slumbering eyes His father's shade descended from the skies, And thus he spoke: "O more than vital breath, Lov'd while I liv'd, and dear even after death! O son, in various toils and troubles toss'd, The King of Heav'n employs my careful ghost On his command, the god, who sav'd from fire Your flaming fleet, and heard your just desire. The wholesome counsel of your friend receive, And here the coward train and women leave. The chosen youth, and those who nobly dare, Transport, to tempt the dangers of the war. The stern Italians will their courage try, Rough are their manners, and their minds are high. But first to Pluto's palace you shall go, And seek my shade among the blest below. For not with impious ghosts my soul remains, Nor suffer'd with the damn'd perpetual pains, But breathes the living air of soft Elysian plains. The chaste Sibylla shall your steps convey, And blood of offer'd victims free the way. There shall you know what realms the gods assign, And learn the fates and fortunes of your line. But now, farewell! I vanish with the night, And feel the blast of heav'n's approaching light." He said, and mix'd with shades, and took his airy flight. "Whither so fast?" the filial duty cried, "And why, ah why, the wish'd embrace denied?" He said, and rose, as holy zeal inspires, He rakes hot embers, and renews the fires. His country gods and Vesta then adores, With cakes and incense, and their aid implores. Next for his friends and royal host he sent, Reveal'd his vision, and the gods' intent, With his own purpose. All, without delay, The will of Jove and his desires obey. They list with woman each degenerate name, Who dares not hazard life for future fame. These they cashier, The brave remaining few, oars, banks, and cables half consum'd renew. The prince designs a city with the plow, the lots their sev'ral tenements allow. This part is nam'd from Ilium, that from Troy, and the new king ascends the throne with joy. A chosen senate from the people draws, appoints the judges, and ordains the laws. Then on the top of Eryx they begin a rising temple to the Paphian queen. Anchises last is honour'd as a god. A priest is added, annual gifts bestow'd, and groves are planted round his blest abode. 9 days they pass in feasts, their temples crown'd, and fumes of incense in the fanes abound. Then from the south arose a gentle breeze, that curled the smoothness of the glassy sea. The rising winds a ruffling gale afford, and call the merry mariners aboard. Now loud laments along the shores resound, of parting friends in close embraces bound. The trembling women, the degenerate train, who shun the frightful dangers of the main, even those desire to sail and take their share of the rough passage and the promis'd war, whom good Aeneas cheers, and recommends to their new master's care his fearful friends. On Eryx' altar 3 fat calves he lays, a lamb new fallen to the stormy seas. Then slips his hawsers, and his anchors weighs. High on the deck the godlike hero stands, with olive crown'd, a charger in his hands. Then cast the reeking entrails in the brine, and pour'd the sacrifice of purple wine. Fresh gales arise, with equal strokes they vie, and brush the buxom seas, and o'er the billows fly. Meantime the mother goddess, full of fears, to Neptune thus address'd with tender tears: "The pride of Jove's imperious queen, the rage, the malice which no sufferings can assuage, compel me to do these prayers, since neither fate, nor time, nor pity can remove her hate. E'en Jove is thwarted by his haughty wife, still vanquish'd, yet she renews the strife. As if 'twere little to consume the town which awed the world and wore th' imperial crown, she prosecutes the ghost of Troy with pains, and gnaws even to the bones the last remains. Let her the causes of her hatred tell, but you can witness its effects too well. You saw the storm she raised on Libyan floods, that mix'd the mounting billows with the clouds, when, bribing Aeolus, she shook the main, and mov'd rebellion in your watery reign. With fury she possess'd the Dardan dames, to burn their fleet with execrable flames, and forc'd Aeneas, when his ships were lost, to leave his followers on a foreign coast. For what remains, your godhead I implore, and trust my son to your protecting power. If neither Jove nor fate's decree withstand, secure this passage to the Latian land." Then thus the mighty ruler of the main: "What may not Venus hope from Neptune's reign? My kingdom claims your birth; my late defence of your endanger'd fleet may claim your confidence. Nor less by land than sea my deeds declare, how much your lov'd Aeneas is my care. Thee, Xanthus, and thee, Simois, I attest, your Trojan troops, when proud Achilles press'd, and drove before him headlong on the plain, and dash'd against the walls the trembling train, when floods were fill'd with bodies of the slain, when crimson Xanthus, doubtful of its way, stood up on ridges to behold the sea, new heaps came tumbling in and choked his way, when your Aeneas fought, but fought with odds of force unequal, and unequal gods. I spread a cloud before the victor's sight, sustain'd the vanquish'd, and secur'd his flight. Even then secur'd him, when I sought with joy the vow'd destruction of ungrateful Troy. My will's the same, fair goddess, fear no more; your fleet shall safely gain the Latian shore. Their lives are given; one destin'd head alone shall perish, and for the multitudes atone. Thus, having arm'd with hopes her anxious mind, his finny team Saturnian Neptune join'd, then adds the foamy bridle to their jaws, and to the loosen'd reins permits the laws. High on the waves his azure car he guides, its axles thunder, and the sea subsides, and the smooth ocean rolls her silent tides. The tempests fly before their father's face, trains of inferior gods his triumph grace, and monster whales before their master play, and choirs of Tritons crowd the watery way. The marshal'd powers in equal troops divide, to right and left the gods his better side enclose, and on the worse the nymphs and nereids ride. Now smiling hope with sweet vicissitude within the hero's mind his joys renew. He calls to raise the masts, the sheets display, the cheerful crew with diligence obey. They scud before the wind, and sail in open sea. Ahead of all the master pilot steers, and, as he leads, the following navy veers. The steeds of night had travell'd half the sky, the drowsy rowers on their benches lie, when the soft god of sleep with easy flight descends, and draws behind a trail of light. Thou, Palinurus, art his destin'd prey; to thee alone he takes his fatal way. Dire dreams to thee and iron sleep he bears, and lighting on the prow, the form of Phorbas wears. Then thus the traitor god began his tale: The winds, my friend, inspire a pleasing gale; the ships without thy care securely sail. Now steal an hour of sweet repose, and I will take the rudder and thy room supply. To whom the yawning pilot, half asleep: Me dost thou bid to trust the treacherous deep, the harlot smiles of her dissembling faith, and to her faith commit the Trojan race? Shall I believe the siren south again, and, oft betray'd, not know the monster main? He said, his fasten'd hands the rudder keep, and fix'd on heav'n his eyes repel invading sleep. The god was wroth, and at his temples threw a branch in Lethe dipp'd, and drunk with Stygian dew. The pilot, vanquish'd by the pow'r divine, soon clos'd his swimming eyes, and lay supine. Scarce were his limbs extended at their length, the god, insulting with superior strength, fell heavy on him, plung'd him in the sea, and with the stern the rudder tore away. Headlong he fell, and struggling in the main, cried out for helping hands, but cried in vain. The victor demon mounts obscure in air, while the ship sails without the pilot's care. On Neptune's faith the floating fleet relies, but what the man forsook, the god supplies. And o'er the dangerous deep secure the navy flies, guides by the Sirens' cliffs a shelfy coast, long infamous for ships and sailors lost, and white with bones. The impetuous ocean roars, and rocks rebellow from the sounding shores. The watchful hero felt the knocks, and found the tossing vessel sail'd on shoaly ground. Sure of his pilot's loss, he takes himself the helm, and steers aloof, and shuns the shelf. Inly he griev'd, and groaning from the breast, deplor'd his death, and thus his pain express'd: For faith repos'd on seas, and on the flattering sky, Thy naked corpse is doom'd on shores unknown to lie. End of Book 5.
Book 6, Part 1 of the Aeneid. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro, translated by John Dryden. Book 6, The World Below, Part 1. He said, and wept, then spread his sails before the winds, and reach'd at length the Cumaean shore. Their anchors dropp'd, his crew the vessels moor. They turn their heads to sea, their sterns to land, and greet with greedy joy the Italian strand. Some strike from clashing flints their fiery seed, some gather sticks the kindled flames to feed, or search for hollow trees and fell the woods, or trace through valleys the discover'd floods. Thus, while their several charges they fulfil, the pious prince ascends the sacred hill, where Phoebus is ador'd, and seeks the shade which hides from sight his venerable maid. Deep in a cave the Sibyl makes abode, thence full of fate returns and of the god. Through Trivia's grove they walk, and now behold, and enter now the temple roofed with gold. Where Daedalus, to fly the Cretan shore, his heavy limbs on jointed pinions bore, the first who sail'd in air, 'tis sung by fame, to the Cumaean coast at length he came, and here alighting built this costly frame. Inscribed to Phoebus, here he hung on high the steerage of his wings that cut the sky, then o'er the lofty gate his art embossed, Androgeos' death and offerings to his ghost. 7 youths from Athens yearly sent to meet the fate appointed by revengeful Crete. And next to those the dreadful urn was placed, in which the destined names by lots were cast. The mournful parents stand around in tears, and rising Crete against their shore appears. There too, in living sculpture might be seen the mad affection of the Cretan queen, then how she cheats her bellowing lover's eye, the rushing leap, the doubtful progeny. The lower part a beast, a man above, the monument of their polluted love. Not far from thence he graved the wondrous maze, 1,000 doors, 1,000 winding ways. Here dwells the monster hid from human view, not to be found but by the faithful clue, till the kind artist, moved with pious grief, lent to the loving maid this last relief, and all those erring paths described so well, that Theseus conquered, and the monster fell. Here hapless Icarus had found his part, had not the father's grief restrained his art. He twice essayed to cast his son in gold, twice from his hands he dropped the forming mould. All this with wondering eyes Aeneas viewed, each varying object his delight renewed. Eager to read the rest, Achates came, and by his side the mad divining dame, the priestess of the god, Deiphobé her name. "Time suffers not," she said, "to feed your eyes with empty pleasures. Haste the sacrifice. 7 bullocks yet unyoked for Phoebus choose, and for Diana 7 unspotted ewes." This said, the servants urge the sacred rites, while to the temple she the prince invites. A spacious cave, within its farmost part, was hewed and fashioned by laborious art. Through the hill's hollow sides before the place 100 doors, 100 entries grace. As many voices issue, and the sound of Sibyl's words as many times rebound. Now to the mouth they come, aloud she cries, "This is the time, enquire your destinies. He comes, behold the god!" Thus while she said, and shivering at this sacred entry stayed, her colour changed, her face was not the same, and hollow groans from her deep spirit came. Her hair stood up, convulsive rage possessed her trembling limbs, and heaved her labouring breast. Greater than humankind she seemed to look, and with an accent more than mortal spoke. Her staring eyes with sparkling fury roll, when all the gods came rushing on her soul. Swiftly she turned, and foaming as she spoke, "Why this delay?" she cried, "the powers invoke! Thy prayers alone can open this abode, else vain are my demands, and dumb the god." She said no more. The trembling Trojans hear, o'erspread with the damp sweat and holy fear. The prince himself, with awful dread possessed, his vows to great Apollo thus addressed: Indulgent God, propitious power to Troy, swift to relieve, unwilling to destroy, directed by whose hand the Dardan dart pierced the proud Grecians' only mortal part, thus far, by fate's decrees and thy commands, through ambient seas and through devouring sands, our exiled crew has sought the Ausonian ground, and now, at length, the flying coast is found. Thus far the fate of Troy, from place to place, with fury has pursued her wandering race. Here cease, ye powers, and let your vengeance end. Troy is no more, and can no more offend. And thou, O sacred maid, inspired to see the event of things in dark futurity, give me what heaven has promised to my fate, to conquer and command the Latian state, to fix my wandering gods, and find a place for the long exiles of the Trojan race. Then shall my grateful hands a temple rear to the twin gods with vows and solemn prayer, and annual rites, and festivals, and games shall be performed to their auspicious names. Nor shalt thou want thy honours in my land, for there thy faithful oracles shall stand preserved in shrines, and every sacred lay which by thy mouth Apollo shall convey, all shall be treasured by a chosen train of holy priests, and ever shall remain. But, oh, commit not thy prophetic mind to flitting leaves, the sport of every wind, lest they disperse in air our empty fate. Write not, but, what the powers ordain, relate. Struggling in vain, impatient of her load, and labouring underneath the ponderous god, the more she strove to shake him from her breast, with more and far superior force he pressed, commands his entrance, and without control usurps her organs and inspires her soul. Now with a furious blast the 100 doors ope of themselves, a rushing whirlwind roars within the cave, and Sibyl's voice restores. Escaped the dangers of the watery reign, yet more and greater ills by land remain. The coast, so long desired, nor doubt the event, thy troops shall reach, but having reached, repent. Wars, horrid wars, I view, a field of blood, and Tiber rolling with a purple flood. Simois nor Xanthus shall be wanting there, a new Achilles shall in arms appear, and he too goddess born, fierce Juno's hate, added to hostile force, shall urge thy fate. To what strange nations shalt thou not resort, driven to solicit aid at every court? The cause the same which Ilium once oppressed, a foreign mistress and a foreign guest. But thou, secure of soul, unbent with woes, the more thy fortune frowns, the more oppose. The dawnings of thy safety shall be shown, from whence thou least shall hope, a Grecian town. Thus from the dark recess the Sibyl spoke, and the resisting air the thunder broke. The cave rebellowed, and the temple shook. Th' ambiguous god who ruled her labouring breast, in these mysterious words his mind expressed. Some truth revealed, in terms involved the rest. At length her fury fell, her foaming ceased, and ebbing in her soul the god decreased. Then thus the chief: No terror to my view, no frightful face of danger can be new. Inured to suffer, and resolved to dare, the fates without my power shall be without my care. This let me crave, since near your grove the road to hell lies open, and the dark abode which Acheron surrounds, the navigable flood. Conduct me through the regions void of light, and lead me longing to my father's sight. For him 1,000 dangers I have sought, and rushing where the thickest Grecians fought, safe on my back the sacred burden brought. He for my sake the raging ocean tried, and wrath of heaven my still auspicious guide, and bore beyond the strength decrepit age supplied. Oft since he breathed his last, in dead of night, his reverend image stood before my sight, enjoined to seek, below his holy shade, conducted there by your unerring aid. But you, if pious minds by prayers are won, oblige the Father, and protect the Son. Yours is the power, nor Proserpine in vain has made you priestess of her nightly reign. If Orpheus, arm'd with his enchanting lyre, the ruthless king with pity could inspire, if from the shades below redeem his wife, if Pollux, offering his alternate life, could free his brother, and can daily go by turns aloft, by turns descend below, Why name I Theseus, or his greater friend, who trode the downward path, and upward could ascend? Not less than theirs from Jove my lineage came, my mother greater, my descent the same. So pray'd the Trojan prince, and while he pray'd, his hands upon the holy altar laid. Then thus replied the prophetess divine: "O goddess born of great Anchises' line, the gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent, and easy is the way. But to return, and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labour lies. To few great Jupiter imparts this grace, and those of shining worth and heav'nly race. Betwixt those regions and our upper light, deep forests and impenetrable night possess the middle space. Th' infernal bounds Cocytus with his sable waves surrounds. But if so dire a love your soul invades, as twice below to view the trembling shades, if you so hard a toil will undertake, as twice to pass the navigable lake, receive my counsel. In the neighbouring grove there stands a tree, the queen of Stygian Jove claims it her own. Thick woods and gloomy night conceal this happy plant from human sight. One bough it bears, but, wondrous to behold, the ductile rind and leaves of radiant gold. This from the vulgar branches must be torn, and to fair Proserpine the present borne, ere leave be given to tempt the nether skies. The first thus rent, a second will arise, and the same metal the same room supplies. Look round the wood with lifted eyes to see the lurking gold upon the fatal tree, then rend it off, as holy rites command. The willing metal will obey thy hand, following with ease, if favour'd by thy fate. Thou art foredoom'd to view the Stygian state. If not, no labour can the tree constrain, and strength of stubborn arms and steel are vain. Besides, you know not while you here attend the unworthy fate of your unhappy friend. Breathless he lies, and his unburied ghost, deprived of funeral rites, pollutes your host. Pay first his pious dues, and, for the dead, to sable sheep around his hearse be led. Then living turfs upon his body lay. This done, securely take the destined way to find the regions destitute of day." She said, and held her peace. Aeneas went, sad from the cave, and full of discontent, unknowing what the sacred Sibyl meant. Achates, the companion of his breast, goes walking by his side, with equal cares oppressed. Walking they talked, and fruitlessly divined what friend the priestess by those words designed. But soon they found an object to deplore. Minesus lay extended on the shore, son of the god of winds, none so renowned, the warrior trumpet in the field to sound, with breathing brass to kindle fierce alarms, and rouse to dare their fate in honourable arms. He served great Hector, and was ever near, not with his trumpet only, but his spear. But by Pallades' arms when Hector fell, he chose Aeneas, and he chose as well. Swollen with applause, and aiming at still more, he now provokes the sea-gods from the shore. With envy Triton heard the martial sound, and the bold champion for his challenge drowned, then cast his mangled carcass on the strand. The gazing crowd around the body stand. All weep, but most Aeneas mourns his fate, and hastens to perform the funeral state. In altar-wise a stately pile they rear, the basis broad below, and top advanced in air. An ancient wood, fit for the work designed, the shady covert of the salvage kind, the Trojans found. The sounding axe is plied. Firs, pines, and pitch-trees in the towering pride of forest ashes feel the fatal stroke, and piercing wedges cleave the stubborn oak. Huge trunks of trees felled from the steepy crown of the bare mountains roll with ruin down. Armed like the rest the Trojan prince appears, and by his pious labour urges theirs. Thus while he wrought, revolving in his mind the ways to compass what his wish designed, he cast his eyes upon the gloomy grove, and then with vows implored the Queen of Love. "O may thy power, propitious still to me, conduct my steps to find the fatal tree in this deep forest, since the Sibyl's breath foretold, alas, too true, Maecenas' death." Scarce had he said, when full before his sight 2 doves, descending from their airy flight, secure upon the grassy plain alight. He knew his mother's birds, and thus he pray'd: "Be you my guides, with your auspicious aid, and lead my footsteps till the branch be found whose glittering shadow gilds the sacred ground. And thou, great parent, with celestial care, in this distress be present to my prayer." Thus having said, he stopp'd with watchful sight, observing still the motions of their flight, what course they took, what happy signs they show. They fed, and, fluttering by degrees, withdrew still farther from the place, but still in view. Hopping and flying, thus they led him on, to the slow lake, whose baleful stench to shun, they winged their flight aloft, then, stooping low, perched on the double tree that bears the golden bough. Through the green leaves the glittering shadows glow, as on the sacred oak the wintry mistletoe, where the proud mother views her precious brood, and happier branches which she never sowed. Such was the glittering, such the ruddy rind, and dancing leaves that wantoned in the wind. He seized the shining bough with gripping hold, and rent away with ease the lingering gold, then to the Sibyl's palace bore the prize. Meantime the Trojan troops with weeping eyes to dead Maecenas pay his obsequies. First from the ground a lofty pile they rear, of pitch trees, oaks, and pines, and unctuous fir. The fabric's front with cypress twigs they strew, and stick the sides with boughs of baleful yew. The topmost part his glittering arms adorn. Warm waters then, in brazen cauldrons borne, are pour'd to wash his body, joint by joint, and fragrant oils the stiffen'd limbs anoint. With groans and cries Maecenas they deplore, then on a bier with purple cover'd o'er the breathless body thus bewail'd they lay, and fire the pile, their faces turn'd away. Such reverend rites their fathers used to pay. Pure oil and incense on the fire they throw, and fat to victims which his friends bestow. These gifts the greedy flames to dust devour, then on the living coals red wine they pour, and last the relics by themselves dispose, which in a brazen urn the priests enclose. Old Aeneas compassed thrice the crew, and dipped an olive branch in holy dew, which thrice he sprinkled round, and thrice aloud invoked the dead, and then dismissed the crowd. But good Aeneas ordered on the shore a stately tomb, whose top a trumpet bore, a soldier's falchion, and a seaman's oar. Thus was his friend interr'd, and deathless fame still to the lofty cape consigns his name. These rites perform'd, the prince without delay hastes to the nether world his destined way. Deep was the cave, and downward as it went, from the wide mouth a rocky rough descent, and here the access a gloomy grove defends, and there the unnavigable lake extends, o'er whose unhappy waters, void of light, no bird presumes to steer his airy flight. Such deadly stenches from the depths arise, and steaming sulphur that infects the eyes. From thence the Grecian bards their legends make, and give the name Avernus to the lake. 4 sable bullocks in the yoke untaught, for sacrifice the pious hero brought. The priestess pours the wine betwixt their horns, then cuts the curling hair that first oblation burns, invoking Hecate hither to repair a powerful name in hell and upper air. The sacred priests with ready knives bereave the beasts of life, and in full bowls receive the streaming blood, a lamb to hell and night, the sable wool without a streak of white. Aeneas offers, and by fate's decree, a barren heifer, Proserpine, to thee. With holocausts he Pluto's altar fills, 7 brawny bulls with his own hand he kills, then on the broiling entrails oil he pours, which ointed thus the raging flame devours. Late the nocturnal sacrifice begun, nor ended till the next returning sun. Then earth began to bellow, trees to dance, and howling dogs in glimmering light advance, ere Hecate came. "Far hence be souls profane," the Sibyl cried, "and from the grove abstain. Now, Trojan, take the way thy fates afford, assume thy courage, and unsheathe thy sword." She said, and passed along the gloomy space. The prince pursued her steps with equal pace. Ye realms yet unrevealed to human sight, ye gods who rule the regions of the night, ye gliding ghosts, permit me to relate the mystic wonders of your silent state. Obscure they went, through dreary shades that led along the waste dominions of the dead. Thus wander travellers in woods by night, by the moon's doubtful and malignant light, when Jove in dusky clouds involves the skies, and the faint crescent shoots by fits before their eyes. Just in the gate and in the jaws of hell, revengeful cares and sullen sorrows dwell, and pale diseases, and repining age, want, fear, and famine's unresisted rage. Here toils, and death's half-brother, sleep, forms terrible to view their sentry keep. With anxious pleasures of a guilty mind, deep frauds before, and open force behind, the Furies' iron beds, and strife that shakes her hissing tresses and unfolds her snakes. Full in the midst of this infernal road, an elm displays her dusky arms abroad. The god of sleep there hides his heavy head, and empty dreams on every leaf are spread. Of various forms unnumbered spectres more, centaurs in double shapes besiege the door. Before the passage horrid Hydra stands, and Briareus with all his 100 hands. Gorgons, Geryon with his triple frame, and vain Chimera vomits empty flame. The chief unsheathed his shining steel, prepared, though seized with sudden fear, to force the guard. Offering his brandished weapon at their face, had not the Sibyl stopped his eager pace, and told him what those empty phantoms were, forms without bodies, and impassive air. Hence to deep Acheron they take their way, whose troubled eddies, thick with ooze and clay, are whirled aloft, and in Cocytus lost. There Charon stands, who rules the dreary coast, a sordid god. Down from his hoary chin a length of beard descends, uncombed, unclean. His eyes like hollow furnaces on fire, a girdle, foul with grease, binds his obscene attire. He spreads his canvas, with his pole he steers, the freights of flitting ghosts in his thin bottom bears. He looked in years, yet in his years were seen a youthful vigour and autumnal green. An airy crowd came rushing where he stood, which filled the margin of the fatal flood, husbands and wives, boys and unmarried maids, and mighty heroes more majestic shades, and youths entombed before their fathers' eyes, with hollow groans and shrieks and feeble cries. Thick as the leaves in autumn strow the woods, or fowls by winter force forsake the floods, and wing their hasty flight to happier lands, such and so thick the shivering army stands, and press for passage with extended hands. Now these, now those, the surly boatman bore, the rest he drove to distance from the shore. The hero, who beheld with wondering eyes the tumult mixed with shrieks, laments, and cries, asked of his guide what the rude concourse meant, why to the shore the thronging people bent, what forms of law among the ghosts were used, why some were ferried o'er, and some refused. "Son of Anchises, offspring of the gods," the Sibyl said, "you see the Stygian floods, the sacred stream which heaven's imperial state attests in oaths and fears to violate. The ghosts rejected are the unhappy crew, deprived of sepulchres and funeral due. The boatman, Charon, those the buried host, he ferries over to the farther coast, nor dares his transport vessel cross the waves, with such whose bones are not composed in graves. 100 years they wander on the shore, at length, their penance done, are wafted o'er." The Trojan chief his forward pace repressed, resolving anxious thoughts within his breast. He saw his friends, who, whelmed beneath the waves, their funeral honours claimed, and asked their quiet graves. The lost Leucapsis in the crowd he knew, and brave leader of the Lycian crew, whom on the Tyrian seas the tempests met, the sailors mastered, and the ships o'erset. Amidst the spirits Palinurus pressed, yet fresh from life, a new admitted guest, who while his steering viewed the stars, and bore his course from Afric to the Latian shore, fell headlong down. The Trojan fixed his view, and scarcely through the gloom the sullen shadow knew. Then thus the prince: "What envious power, O friend, brought your loved life to this disastrous end? For Phoebus, ever true in all he said, has in your fate alone my faith betrayed. The god foretold you should not die before you reached, secure from seas, the Italian shore. Is this the unerring power? The ghost replied, Nor Phoebus flattered, nor his answers lied, nor envious gods have sent me to the deep. But while the stars in course of heaven I keep, my wearied eyes were seized with fatal sleep. I fell, and with my weight the helm constrained was drawn along, which yet my grip retained. Now by the winds and raging waves I swear, your safety more than mine was then my care, lest of the guide bereft, the rudder lost, your ship should run against the rocky coast. 3 blustering nights borne by the southern blast I floated, and discovered land at last. High on a mountain wave my head I bore, forcing my strength, and gathering to the shore. Panting, but past the danger, now I seized the craggy cliffs, and my tired members eased. While cumbered with my dropping clothes I lay, the cruel nation, covetous of prey, stained with my blood the unhospitable coast. And now by winds and waves my lifeless limbs are tossed, which avert by yon ethereal light, which I have lost for this eternal night. Or if by dearer ties you may be won, by your dead sire, and by your living son, redeem from this reproach my wandering ghost, or with your navy seek the Velin coast, and in a peaceful grave my corpse compose. Or if a nearer way your mother shows, without whose aid you durst not undertake this frightful passage o'er the Stygian lake, lend to this wretch your hand, and waft him o'er to the sweet banks of yon forbidden shore. Scarce had he said, the prophetess began, What hopes delude thee, miserable man? Think'st thou thus unentombed to cross the floods, to view the furies and infernal gods, and visit without leave the dark abodes? Attend the term of long revolving years. Fate and the dooming gods are deaf to tears. This comfort of thy dire misfortune take, the wrath of heaven, inflicted for thy sake, with vengeance shall pursue th' inhuman coast, till they propitiate thy offended ghost, and raise a tomb, with vows and solemn prayer, and Palinurus' name the place shall bear. This calm'd his cares, soothed with his future fame, and pleased to hear his propagated name. Now nearer to the Stygian lake they draw, who from the shore the surly boatmen saw, observed their passage through the shady wood, and marked their near approaches to the flood. Then thus he called aloud, inflamed with wrath, Mortal, whate'er, who this forbidden path in arms presum'st to tread, I charge thee, stand, and tell thy name and business in the land. Know this, the realm of night, the Stygian shore, my boat conveys no living bodies o'er, nor was I pleased great Theseus once to bear, who forced a passage with his pointed spear, nor strong Acleides, men of mighty fame, and from the immortal gods their lineage came. In fetters one the barking porter tied, and took him trembling from his sovereign's side. 2 sought by force to seize his beauteous bride. To whom the Sibyl thus, Compose thy mind, nor frauds are here contrived, nor force designed. Still may the dog the wandering troops constrain of airy ghosts, and vex the guilty train, and with her grisly lord his lovely queen remain. The Trojan chief, whose lineage is from Jove, much famed for arms, and more for filial love, is sent to seek his sire in your Elysian grove. If neither pity nor heaven's command can gain his passage to the Stygian strand, this fatal present shall prevail at least. Then showed the shining bow concealed within her vest. No more was needful, for the gloomy god stood mute with awe to see the golden rod, admired the destined offering to his queen, a venerable gift so rarely seen. His fury thus appeased, he puts to land, the ghosts forsake their seats at his command. He clears the deck, receives the mighty freight, the leaky vessel groans beneath the weight. Slowly she sails, and scarcely stems the tides, the pressing water pours within her sides. His passengers at length are wafted o'er, exposed in muddy weeds upon the miry shore. No sooner landed, in his den they found the triple porter of the Stygian sound, grim Cerberus, who soon began to rear his crested snakes and armed his bristling hair. The prudent Sibyl had before prepared a sop, in honey steeped, to charm the guard, which, mixed with powerful drugs, she cast before his greedy grinning jaws just oped to roar. With 3 enormous mouths he gapes, and straight, with hunger pressed, devours the pleasing bait. Long draughts of sleep his monstrous limbs enslave, he reels, and, falling, fills the spacious cave. The keeper charmed, the chief without delay passed on and took the irremeable way. Before the gates the cries of babes new born, whom fate had from their tender mothers torn, assault his ears, then those whose form of laws condemn to die when traitors judge their cause. Nor want they lots, nor judges to review the wrongful sentence and award anew. Minos, the strict inquisitor, appears, and lives and crimes with his assessors hears. Round in his urn the blended balls he rolls, absolves the just and dooms the guilty souls. The next in place and punishment are they who prodigally throw their souls away, fools who, repining at their wretched state, and loathing anxious life, suborned their fate. With late repentance now they would retrieve the bodies they forsook, and wish to live, their pains and poverty desire to bear, to view the light of heaven and breathe the vital air. But fate forbids, the Stygian floods oppose, and with circling streams the captive souls enclose. End of Book 6, Part 1.